So I'm a senior. I go to a really small private school in Bernie. It's called Vanguard. Super tiny. You've never heard of it, I'm sure. But my story starts on November 17th of 1996. I was born in Liberal, Kansas, and my family lived in Texas, but the closest hospital for me to be born at was in Kansas, so they had to drive up to Kansas, and my mom had me prematurely, and I was really, really sick and had a lot of medical issues when I was born, and basically through those first few weeks, the doctors just kept telling my parents that I wouldn't live and I wouldn't really succeed in any way because I just had so many problems. And so then my church and my family and just a group of believers just gathered around my family at that point, and I ended up just being able to leave the hospital a couple weeks after I was born, and basically haven't had a single health problem since. It's just basically defied all odds at that point if you look at everything that happened. And so that was just one thing that happened in my life that looking back, it's like that shouldn't have happened. None of that, like statistically or anything, should have happened the way it did, but that's just showing God through my life, basically. And so that has really, that instance, although I obviously don't remember it, that instance and having gone through that and knowing all the stuff that happened has affected, first of all, my career choice and the things that I want to do with my future, but also just my faith and the way that God works in my life. So then, after I was born, a few months later, my family moved to Kerrville, Texas, about an hour away, and they lived there for about 3 years, and I don't really remember much of that time, but then we moved down to the coast to Victoria, and you might know where Victoria is, you might not. It's about an hour and a half from the beach. It was pretty great. So we lived there till I was in the 6th grade, and while I was in the 2nd grade, my dad came to school one day, and they called me to the office, and I had no idea what was going on. They called my brother and I to the office, and my dad came in and he was crying, and I had never seen my dad cry before, and I was just so confused. And basically he told us that my sisters had been in a car accident, and I have 2 older sisters, and he said that they'd been in a car accident and they were being life-flighted here to San Antonio, and he had no idea if they were going to be okay or not. And I was like a little 2nd grader, and I just started bawling because I couldn't imagine life without my big sisters. So once again, the doctors told my sister that she would have all these problems and wouldn't walk and had all these broken bones and messed up all of her insides, but 2 weeks later she was walking out of the hospital on crutches. And that's just another instance of defying the odds in my family, and just the Lord working through us, and all these things that happen that we don't know why they're happening at the moment, but then later we can look back and see that's just God working His will to do something else later. So then, fast forward to my 6th grade year, my family decided to move again, and so we moved back here to Kerrville, where I've been living since then. And at that point in time, that was the worst thing that my parents could do to me. I was so mad. I did not want to move here. I loved being by the coast. I loved the humidity. I loved all of it. And then they were like, well, we're going to move. And I just was so unhappy. But we moved here, and I started going to the school that I go to now. And I met a girl who came to Oak Hills, and she got me involved in Oak Hills, and she just came occasionally every few Wednesday nights to Club 678, and then I basically just told my parents that I loved the church and I wanted to continue staying here. So then my brothers started coming with me, and we stayed, and then my friend ended up moving, but then we decided to stay involved in Oak Hills, and then we got really involved with going on all the trips and stuff. So we went to Coldplay and Fall Retreat, and to Laredo. My 7th and 8th grade year, I got to go on the Laredo mission trip that they don't get to do anymore, but it was a really cool trip, and I got to meet some pretty cool people. I met Aaron in 7th grade there, and it was just a really cool trip to basically show me what I wanted to do with my life and how much I loved doing mission work and helping people and stuff like that. So, and I got really excited about what the future would hold for me at Oak Hills, because I had never had an experience where I got to like go on trips and do cool things and just lead for a while. So then freshman year came around, and I joined the Park Refuge group. Even though we lived in Kerrville, my parents bless them, they drove my brother and I an hour each week to bring us to church on Wednesday nights, and that's great of them. I'm so blessed to have parents who are so willing to get us involved in church. So my brother and I were part of the Clark Refuge group, and then that freshman year I went to the New Orleans mission trip, and that was a trip that it was amazing to me. It was just crazy to see people in such a bad situation, still rebuilding 5 years after Hurricane Katrina, and they were still rebuilding their houses and still fixing things, but they were still such happy people. And so it was just really cool to come in contact with those people. And that year, freshman year, I go to a really, really small school. There's 7 kids in my grade. And that freshman year was really hard to try to figure out who I wanted to be and who I wanted to be friends with. In such a small group of people, you don't really have much choice. And so that was a really difficult year for me. But then sophomore year came around, and my brother was a junior, so we were started visiting colleges for him. And so I got started looking at colleges and trying to decide what I wanted for my future pretty early, because I was doing it all with my brother, basically. So Dan and a couple other people from here told us about ACU, and I just fell in love with the school sophomore year. And so we visited there per my request. It wasn't my brother, but we were looking at schools for him, and I was like, put ACU on the list. So we went and visited ACU, and I loved the school. And so then my brother kind of just put ACU on the back burner and had a lot of other schools in mind. But then turned out he went to ACU this year, so that's pretty exciting. But then that 10th grade year, we went to Guatemala, and in Guatemala, it was just a totally life-changing event. If you get the chance to go on those mission trips, get involved, do them. They're life-changing, they're amazing. So I went to Guatemala, and I fell in love with the country, I fell in love with the people, I fell in love with the idea of just helping children, and seeing the smiles on those kids' faces when they have nothing. They live in an orphanage, and they're so happy, and they were just so excited and loving, and it was amazing. Like, they touched us more than we touched them, and like, it was ridiculous. It was amazing. So then junior year rolled around, and things started getting tough again for me. I started feeling really inadequate in my schoolwork and who I was, and I just felt like I started doubting myself a lot, and with that came doubting God as well. I just felt like none of my stuff was going to line up the way I wanted it to, and I had all these plans for my life. I wanted to be a neonatologist for as long as I can remember, and if you don't know what that is, it's a premature baby doctor, and basically hearing the story of how I dealt with everything that happened to me when I was a baby, that made me want to be a neonatologist. And so when I got to junior year, I just started really doubting that that would happen, or that I would go to a good college and get into med school and stuff like that. So I just started feeling like I was not going to be able to reach any of my goals. And then someone read to me Psalms 37:4, and it says, "If you delight yourself in the Lord, He will give you the desires of your heart." And once again, this verse just, everyone knows that verse, but it just gave me hope for my future and hope for the ability that, like, I just focus my mind on Him and His will work out, basically. So then after 11th grade, I got to go back to Guatemala and fell in love with the people and the kids and everything all over again, and that was amazing once again. But then in this year, I got to apply early to Abilene Christian, and I got accepted in September. And basically at that point, I was just so content. Well, everything was lining up the way that I actually wanted it to. But then I got to school this September at the tiny little private school that I go to, and found out that they hadn't put me in any classes other than the dual credit classes that I was already lined up to be taking. And so my parents basically had to decide to homeschool me this year. And it was a really, really weird decision to make because I'm a senior and that was not any of my plans. But I basically still am like enrolled in the school, but I do all of my schoolwork at home. I do online college classes all the time, and that's all I'm doing. So it's really interesting, but it definitely wasn't how my plans were lined up in my head, and I was really doubting myself because I didn't think that I would be able to push myself to keep myself on top of my work and things like that if no one was telling me to, because I had always been going to school and had teachers and things like that to tell me to do my work. So then after things began to fall into place with my college, I felt way more content with the situation and how everything was just starting to go, and I got more comfortable with my school and stuff. And then I read 2 Corinthians 12:9, which she read during worship, and it says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." So this year that verse has just stuck with me, because it's just the idea that things may not be going my way and things may not have turned out the way that I was expecting them to at all this year. But no matter how confused or weak I'm feeling, like, this is His will and He is still in control, and He's just working it all out for me. So I just have to trust Him and just do as He asks. So that's kind of my story. Like I said, I'm going to Abilene Christian next year. Woo! Go Wildcats. And so yeah, thank y'all.